where we will be zooming in to developments in the energy markets. If we look at energy markets and energy prices in the past few months, we've seen the pandemic caused prices to first drop to record lows and then to increase by as much as 457% for natural gas and over 376% for electricity in just 18 months. That's German prices with similar movements happening across Europe. So what has prompted this? Is it really unprecedented? What can we learn from past price shocks? Is this the new normal? This and many other questions we will be answering with our next speakers, Benedict de Meulemeester, he's CEO at E&C Consultants, and also Merlijn Mertens, energy trader at E&C Consultants. So welcome to the two of you on stage. Benedict, I think we're going to be starting with you. Is the situation we're currently facing really unprecedented? Have we seen prices ever this high? What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, if we are looking back, and some among you were probably already in the energy market at that moment, but 2008 was the previous high. So the previous moment we knew in the markets of seeing this record high prices. We had then a gas price just above 40 euros, 41, some of the benchmarks 42 euros per megawatt hour. Electricity prices reached up to 100, so we saw those racing up to a level of 100. And of course, also we had the famous almost $150 per barrel oil price. That was also quite a shock. So I think for a lot of you here in the audience then, when we lived through that, remember that as being extremely high prices, and then we all thought that the world would come to a standstill with such high prices. So that was a previous high. What was causing this? That was basically emerging economies between 2000 and 2008 were consuming huge volumes of energy, of other commodities, and this was causing prices to rise month after month after month after month. We start showing in 2006 here. It already started before that lots of commodity prices were increasing. It was basically a broad trend that went from 2000 to 2008. And then the peak was on the 11th of July, 2008. And then, of course, we all know that we went into this financial crisis and yeah, everything started to crash after that. We call this period between, I would say, 2009 and 2021. If we look back at it now, we could call this the big calm, because prices were going up, gas prices year ahead, between almost 12 euros per megawatt hour, and that was really in 2020, and 28 euros per megawatt hour. Do you remember the days when you got nervous over a 2 euro per megawatt hour increase in gas prices, I would say? Those were the days. Looking back at it from today's perspective, of course, we could call this the big calm. What happened in the gas markets, I think a major event was shale gas. US, instead of becoming a net importer of gas, became a net exporter. All over the world, they were gearing up for increasing conventional gas production. For example, Australia is a good example of that, where a lot of new LNG capacity was geared up and all of that. All that gas came into the market. On top of that, renewable energy definitely also had an impact on this. This is the period in which in Europe we expanded by, Gerard knows the figures probably better than I do, but 10–15% our production of electricity with renewables. So all of this coincided for giving us quite a calm market. And if you would make a very long-term trend, I do this from time to time, I look at oil prices since 1860 just to reassure myself. And if you look at that, then you'll see that this is the way that energy markets most of the time are moving. Most of the time, the energy price is actually relatively low, and then all of a sudden you get these super spikes, and it's very spiky. The reason I see for that from a macroeconomic point of view is what I call, with an academic term, but it's slow and slower elasticity. Or on the demand side, people react to higher prices, they lower demand, but they do so slowly. Yeah. Most of us, we haven't turned down our thermostats yet, reacting to higher prices, so it's quite slow. on the production side, on the supply side, it's even much slower. It takes you 10, 15, 20 years to explore, find, and produce finally the gas in a gas field. Gerard just talked about what happens with the planning of building new power infrastructure. So this takes a really, really long time. And this is, if you think about that, this interaction of how supply and demand are doing this will always keep bringing us in situations where all of a sudden there's a shortage and it's not so easy to solve it. It takes a few years for the world to figure it out, for the investment to kick in and solve that issue.
Mm-hmm. Right, so now we're moving towards 2020, 2021. So Merlijn, could you tell us what's been the impact of the pandemic on energy prices?
Yeah, so the big calm was a period I was not lucky enough to experience because more or less this is the point at which I started working at E&C. So we're talking about June 2020, a historical low. So year ahead prices reached 11.8 euros per megawatt hour, which is more or less the same level that was reached before there in 2009. So really low levels, but you have to put it into perspective because at the time itself we were also talking about spot prices, front month prices of 3.5 euros per megawatt hour. So this price, still 3.5 times higher, to some people seemed as a really high price still. Fortunately there, our customers know we have the opportunity hunting tool which would have unambiguously identified this price as really opportune and would have urged you to hedge at this price point. Certainly when we saw it then, ramped slightly up afterwards. But indeed, we saw historical low prices at the peak of this pandemic, yeah.
But that didn't last for too long then?
No, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't last very long. Actually, I think if you think back about that Q1, March, April, May 2020, the whole world was coming to this unexpected standstill. We were all sitting home wondering, how am I supposed to do this now, my job here from my daughter's room or whatever? Everybody really thought we were in for a very big recession. That's what everybody thought. And there is this week again an article in The Economist which I think is super interesting to read. They are highlighting again the fact that the inflation we've seen of commodity prices, that is very much induced by policy. That there's been some terrible mistakes made because in the initial phase of that lockdown and of that economic crisis that it caused, our policymakers were very scared that we would all stop spending money. That was the big scare they had, that the whole economy would come to a standstill because we would all be sitting at home, not traveling anymore, not going to restaurants, not buying any new clothes. So the whole economy would come to a standstill because of a big dramatic drop in demand. So they devised their traditional economic instruments that we've been using successfully for the last 2 decades economically by stimulating demand. And they all came up with this gigantic programs for stimulating demand. But if you think then about what happened, we didn't get this demand crisis because we all started to spend money very rapidly again. Lots of people bought a new car. People started to paint their houses or bought a new house. So all of a sudden there was a lot of demand coming up. I've heard in that period lots of clients saying our order books are completely full, more full than anything we've ever seen before. And still, Joe Biden was still throwing more than $1 trillion at the US economy, doing lots of public investment, increasing even more the demand for those construction raw materials, of which our customers in that sector are telling us we don't know how to produce them because it's so difficult. And this is, of course, then what caused the fact that today we can say, okay, we can clearly relate price events that are happening today to the war situation. But we should never forget it started before that. It started before that, and then on the 15th of September, we breached the 41.62. The summer of 21 was the cruel summer during which we all wanted to go on holiday, but the markets were just increasing every day, and you came back from holidays and you were up 20-30% on your energy costs. That was really not nice of the markets to do that. So it just went up and up and up and up. And then, yeah, with on the 15th of September, that first record high breached.
So that's essentially, yeah, how high prices did eventually get.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So the prices started ramping up. Maybe that's worth noticing as well. November 2020 is when it all started, on the optimism of the good results that they had on the vaccine efficacy. But they continued to go up, and the reason was also because we were facing a cold spring in 2021. Gas storages were being drained. There was not a big incentive to refill them due to the high prices, and actually lower prices going further into the future. So simply no incentive to refill the storages. Basically ending up with a scenario that in December 22nd, we reached a maximum price of 140.4 euros per megawatt hour. And yes, looking at this peak, so prices didn't stay there. It was due to a combination of things. So we're talking about December 22nd. A lot of people have left on holiday already, so that makes the markets less liquid. Mm-hmm. But you also have the fact there that people wanted to close their positions before the start of the year. So we're talking about the last trading days here of coal 22. And so this finally resulted then in these record high prices, also due to the storage levels at that point, for example, being 90% lower than what we saw the year before, 30% lower than what we saw in 2019. So there was a big fear that we would run out of gas throughout the winter if we wouldn't see bigger supplies coming from Russia. But as said by Gerard as well, Russia simply, they satisfied or answered to their contractual obligations, but they didn't send any more gas. Well, Europe was saying like, okay, why are they not sending more gas? But of course, at that point, we were not aware of what was going to happen still. There was also this cold winter that Russia experienced, so we were giving them a bit of the advantage of the doubt there, stating that okay, they would probably need it for domestic use as well to refill their own storages first. Yeah.
I think it's time now for us to understand what does this mean for energy buyers in practice. What does this mean for our audience here in the room?
Well, crazy days to be sure. And I think one of the main things I've seen with a lot of people is you get into uncharted territory. You're above the previous record high, and you're at a level of which you can't believe that it's actually possible. I think that's an emotion we all had looking at this price coming in the morning saying, that's not possible. Sometimes you were looking at a gas price and saying, am I looking at a power price here, or what is this? And the big danger of that, of being in that uncharted territory, is that you start sticking your head in the sand. That you just like, this is so high, this is impossible, this has to come down again. You stick your head in the sand and you stop buying at a certain moment. You get paralyzed. And you're sitting there and just day after day, it's going up. Until that day that somebody from in the organization, a CFO or someone else, walks into your office and says, I've realized that energy prices have gone up. What have you done about it? And then you say, well, it was so high that I thought it wasn't possible it would go higher, and now it's higher. And then very often we see panic decisions, that then people are too bold in buying something. But it is extremely challenging. It's absolutely extremely challenging to be living through such a situation of just seeing day after day a price level when you already thought yesterday this is impossible, today is even more impossible.
Because after this historical peak that we're seeing here, how has 2022 been so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's an understatement to state that it was kind of a roller coaster there. So we saw multiple peaks appear as well. Of course, one we all remember is February 24th, the start of the Russian invasion. So there, actually, February 20th was already mentioned as a possible starting date of the invasion. So what we saw there is that nothing happened on that day. As a result, the next day, Monday, when the markets opened, prices came down quite a bit. It seemed like, okay, no invasion was going to happen. What we saw then the day after was that the Russian army entered the Donbas region first, 22nd of February. And then, prices reacted, but quite mildly still. So that triggered us actually to do a lot more hedges still on those days. And then 24th, finally, things escalated. We saw a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And of course, then there's a lot of uncertainty entering the market. Will we see gas supplies from Russia continue? Will Europe cut it off with sanctions? Will Russia cut it off from their side? So a lot of uncertainty in this market, and therefore, yeah, you see this huge risk premium appear on the year-ahead gas price, basically, because nobody knows where gas prices are going at that point.
Must be a crazy job to be keeping up with all these developments, isn't it?
Yeah, it was quite challenging. For example, this other peak, when Putin demanded unfriendly countries, that is, to pay for the natural gas in rubles, that was immediately then by the G7 rejected and identified as a unilateral breach of contract. But then Putin refined it a bit, stating that they could still pay in euros or US dollars, but to an account on Gazprom Bank, in which it would then be converted to rubles to pay then for the natural gas. There's still a lot of discussion going on whether that would be a breach of sanctions that we currently have. And as said by Gerard already, so Poland decided not to do this, and as a result, we now saw that Russia has indeed cut gas supplies to Poland. But as also stated, they were quite well prepared. So the impact is quite limited there at this point. But of course, now we're really looking forward to the next few days and months, what other countries will do. Austria already stated that they would do these payments. But of course, yeah, many people are looking at Germany, what they're going to do there. Yeah.
And it's interesting because, it is incredible to be watching this, and we are looking at it through the lens of what it does to the energy markets, but then you have everything behind this, of course, also. And you need to do this. You need to know what's happening in the markets. At the same time also, I see that with a lot of people, they get too focused on that. I heard one really big company buying terawatt hours, and they literally decided on the eve of the invasion not to hedge. So I literally heard our CEO says that the invasion is not going to happen. Yeah, so I mean, and that's, I think, really behavior in this market that you need to try to avoid by all costs, that you are trying to look into the heads, I mean, of everything that's going on. We don't know what's going to be the next step. We can only prepare for it, make sure that if it happens, we are ready and we can react again. Yeah. Another thing which I observed, in the beginning, people were much more nervous. Also internally in our company, everybody was a lot more nervous. So I think these last 2 years have been an extreme lesson in how adaptable we are as human beings. Because first weeks that this is happening and markets are racing up by tens of euros per megawatt hour for natural gas, we are in shock, and then all of a sudden it becomes the new normal. It's a calm day. We only had a €4 increase today. So we are very adaptable in that, and that's important also throughout this situation. Our main advice has been not to panic and to keep your calm, and that is really, really important.
So that was quite remarkable because if you hedged at the morning and you see then that price in the evening go back to where it was before, then of course I think many people would curse themselves for it. And actually that's a bit of a habit that we created there, not to react on these panic moments in the market, not to buy on these days when prices are really surging. But it's better then to wait when markets calm down a bit, or allow them some time to settle, process the new information that has entered the market. And many times we've seen actually prices come down to levels close that we saw before that peak. And also we started with the habit to also hedge on days where the prices are slightly heading down, because we noticed getting OTC quotes from suppliers on these panic days, it's really challenging. So first of all, sometimes they don't even offer quotes. But secondly, if they offer quotes, they add a huge risk premium on top of that because of the intraday volatility. And what you're then basically doing is adding a big premium on top of the already very high price. So it's better to then hedge on days on which it's a bit calmer, when you see prices return to more reasonable levels. But yeah, not only in percentage-wise, so we saw intraday variations of 139 euros per megawatt hour on a single day. So that's quite remarkable, because in 2013 to 2020, as already stated, a €2 variation was already very exceptional at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then I think what many people are wondering,
maybe here, just to show, I showed you the month ahead, but also year ahead, there we saw intraday variations of over 30% on some dates. Also an important date here, for example, for the front month, where you see this biggest peak, was March the 7th. That basically was the time when the US and Europe were discussing about an oil embargo, and then Putin stated that he would really cut off gas supplies in retaliation if something like that would be implemented by Europe. So that was also a very incredible day for us to witness these price movements. Yeah.
I see. So after having had this journey across energy markets, I believe that what many people are wondering is really, is this a new normal that we need to get used to?
I hope not. I hope not. And it's not going to be like that. It's like Gerard said, what goes up must come down. We just don't know when. We really don't know when it is going to come down. But a big question mark is also just if we are going to solve this by transitioning our markets and we use so much renewable energy, what degree of volatility will that introduce into the markets? The standard way of looking at that is saying, okay, you have intermittency. When the sun doesn't shine, when the wind doesn't blow, the price is going to go very high. So you will have a lot more volatility. But what will be the impact of having much more storage of electricity? That should dampen that volatility. So things like this, like intraday volatility, is very, very difficult to predict what will happen with that in the future. If anything, I mean, if after this now somebody's still not convinced that you cannot predict energy markets, I really don't know. I mean, it's nobody could tell this. So it is predictable, and it's important to be ready for it. A strategy means that you have something in place that helps you, that if this happens, you know what to do. What we did learn from this was that at a certain point, markets increased so much that we said traditional tools that we use, like budget at risk, maximum year-on-year increase, well, opportunity hunting for sure, they just didn't work anymore because the volatility and the increase was so extreme. And then we reverted to saying, a lot of clients giving them the advice to say, just set up a schedule, do regular hedges. Don't stick your head in the sand, keep doing something. Do it in small, because that's what I've learned in 20 years in this market. Risk management means spread, 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 spread. That's always the best way of avoiding risk. So put it in small, but don't stop doing anything and hoping for better. And then, like Merlijn said, try to do it in these temporary moments of relief. And that gives you something, but then we are in such an uncertain situation that, it's highly likely that for months and who knows, maybe years, we will still see very strong developments in these markets, with markets shooting all over the place.
What are the main learnings, do you believe, from the past periods?
It's unpredictable is really for me
And never assume anything, I would say. Never say it cannot go higher than this. I heard that story since I saw prices of 30 euros per megawatt hour. People said it is unsustainable to see a gas price this high. Now we're above 100, and it has been there for a while already. So I think as long as we have this geopolitical instability, that will be a main driver for volatility to continue. Having more renewables in the power mix, that will cause day-to-day, intraday volatility. But on the longer term, I mean, weather events average each other out. So like on the forward market, that should still remain quite stable there. But having geopolitical instability for sure makes you realize that you cannot predict anything. Like having an invasion or not, nobody could tell you that answer before we saw it happen.
Excellent. So I believe that we can wrap up our second session of the day here. So thank you very much, Benedict, Merlijn, to guide us through this incredible roller coaster that the energy markets have been in the past year and a half. So if I can have a big round of applause for the two of them.